podcast. Yes. Well, especially now because things are on. How's my lip story?
Okay, everyone. Hey, there we are. I'm back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Welcome back, really. Thank you for joining us for today's event. We have a live episode of the Forever Young podcast. We're going to examine the intersection of care and digital technologies. But before that, in order to situate you, we are streaming to YouTube and we are live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Sawchuk, Montreal. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community daily to create daily activities to help mobilize knowledge. We're running this event as a live stream Zoom meeting. We welcome comments and questions there via the chat. Those of you in the space, when it comes around to question period, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone over to you. With that, it's now my pleasure to pass it over to the team and one of the members of the Forever Young podcast, coming to us from the Montreal West Public Library, Kathy Menorgan. Kathy, welcome in.
Hi, welcome everyone, and a special warm welcome to those listening to the podcast. It is created by three seniors, Branya, Sharon, and Kathy, from Montreal West Public Library. This podcast is part of a series we have entitled Forever Young, Living and Aging in Our Modern World. In many ways, technology defines our modern world, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Sawchuk, has taken a long, hard look at how seniors are getting along on this ever-changing playing field. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
And for the record, Kim is a professor in the Department of Communication Studies at Concordia University in Montreal, where she holds the Concordia University Research Chair in Mobile Media Studies. We are recording this podcast with Kim in person, with an audience.
Make noise, audience.
As part of Concordia's Bold 2024, Let's Age Together series of events. This live recording is one of the Bold 2024 series, which is spread over 10 days and designed to shine a spotlight on the issues relating to aging. We're honored to have been invited to take part in this project and very excited to chat with you, Kim, about your research revolving around aging in networked societies. But first, can you tell us a bit about Be Old 2024?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Is it muted? Kim, there's a button on the bottom. Maybe that's just
Technology. Now you can hear me.
There we go.
If it can go wrong on you, it will go wrong, and it will go wrong when you're in public. Just to remind you. Yeah, so Bold is, this is the fourth kind of time that we've held an event like this at Concordia. The first two times that we held it, we called it Age 2.0. And I think the first one, Constance will correct me if I'm wrong, it was in 2013 to 2016, right? We got the first grant in 2013, first one 2016, next one in 2017, where we hosted the European Network of Living Labs, big Lollapalooza. And then we held another one, which we retitled Bold, B/Old, because we really wanted to highlight that aging in itself is a process that, if we're lucky enough to get old, also requires courage, tenacity, creativity, and ways of always adapting. So Bold seemed like a fitting title. Then we all had a good time at that one, and then the pandemic came. And then we put things on a hiatus. So welcome back. This is the next live iteration of Bold post-pandemic. And so Bold really is a group and community effort where really we're trying to bring members of the community organizations who are working with older adults, organizations interested in working with older adults, or you're working with younger people interested in issues of aging, academics, artists, activists, together to be able to discuss how it is we want to live together and how we see our future together, our joint future together. So the idea of BOLD is just that, to work with the lovely people here at Fourth Space to kind of open up Concordia to this public discussion, debate, ruminations, and reflections.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My question would be, is there a eureka moment that launched you into studying technology and aging, or aging in particular? Okay, do you want me to answer that again, ask that again? Was there a eureka moment for you that launched you into studying technology and aging?
Wow, you've just asked me a question that's going to make me tell a story that might make me cry that I haven't thought about for a long time. It really was when I first started teaching in the Department of Communication Studies, and I was hired to do theory, feminist theory. And I kept saying, if you do theory and you think, you're also making, because you're making new ideas. And my department really at that time was thinking, people do practice, they make things, they make videos, they make films, or they do what I do, which is we teach in a classroom. And I always was blending the boundaries. So I started, and I'd also started working, creating, I guess, if you remember Studio XX, which is now Ada X, which is one of the first digital media studios, feminist media studios, I think, in North America, that we co-founded in 1996 with a bunch of other wonderful people. So I was always interested in media production. But I was also interested in, my grandmother I thought was a great storyteller, my grandma Kauka, Annie, but she had never had a chance to go to school. She was really bright, but never had. And so I wanted her to tell her life story. So I got a digital video camera and I started asking her questions. And she told her story. And then finally she looked at me and she said, "Give me that thing." And she took the camera from me and she said, "It's your turn now. I want to ask you questions." And that was my eureka moment, when I realized that it wasn't up to me to be holding the camera and to be asking questions. It really was this woman who was in her late 80s at this point, who was interested in being behind the camera possibly and asking the questions. So she said, "Yeah, I'm not just divulging information to you. You tell me about your life story." And so it was that for me, I think, was a real turning point. So not so much about maybe digital technologies, but about questions of power and who has the power to speak and who has the power to set the agenda by asking the questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's a lovely story. I'm going to pass the mic to Sharon, who has questions.
Thank you, Kathy. So Kim, I'm Sharon Rosen, a retired sociology teacher and a senior, and I'm delighted to be participating in BOLD B/Old podcast today, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to interview you. Our specific group is here today because Eric Craven, who is somewhere around here, our 40-something warm media expert, mentored us through a New Horizons project called Threads of Memory, where we were interviewing seniors for the Montreal West Public Library. And from there, we developed this podcast entitled Forever Young, Living and Aging in Montreal West, is the whole title. And Eric produces this podcast, and without him, we wouldn't be here, partially because of the partially because of his contacts and because of his mentoring and making it technologically possible for us. And I thank him for that and for the connection to this larger research community. As a scholar, your research fosters opportunities for intergenerational media making similar to this podcast. What do you believe are the benefits of these kinds of initiatives?
That's a really great and difficult question. I think partially it's because we often associate digital and technology with the new. And we often think that what's opposite of the new is what's passé and old. And so I think working intergenerationally with technology makes us question what's new about technology and what technology claims to be new and innovative. But also it is a chance for all of us to question who's old, what does old mean? What does it mean to be older? Nobody's ever really old. I mean, the older is somebody else always. So I think those are really valuable lessons, but also working intergenerational but I think as well, I think the students maybe who are in this audience and the people who are younger than me may want to speak to this later and tell us what they've learned. What I've observed holding intergenerational workshops is that who thinks that they know technology? Often we think that younger people know technology. They learn it from their peers.
Okay.
When you age, sometimes you don't have that same peer group to learn the technology, or you're afraid of making a mistake, you're afraid you might break it. So you don't explore and play in the same way. And so what I think Eric does so beautifully, but also working intergenerationally does, is teaches us as we age that partially through playing and engaging in meaningful activities that use technology, that's how we learn it. Sitting in a class and reading a menu or following a manual, boring, who's gonna remember anything? But you have a purpose, you have a project, you wanna make a fanzine. That gives you a reason to decide what it is you wanna learn. What kind of, is it a digital camera? Is it scanning? Is it a text editing software? What is it? Do you wanna learn how to find information on the internet? It's a huge amount of learning. So there's that. I'd also say that holding the intergenerational workshops also, I think maybe informs the students that aging isn't something to be afraid of. And I spoke on the radio about what I call FOA, fear of aging. And if we live in age-segregated societies where, from this age to that age, to that age, to that age, you may not come in contact with each other, or that things are target marketed to people of particular ages, assuming we are supposed to behave in certain kinds of ways. What I think people discover of all ages when they work together intergenerationally is that what are the points of commonality and contact? What are the points of difference where we can learn from each other? So the intergenerationality, creates, I think, a vibrant, opportunity for everyone to learn from each other, and for also younger folks to learn that what we like to say is everybody brings something to the table. So everybody discovers what it is they have as a skill, a capacity, a knowledge that they didn't know they had, and how can we bring the best out in each other? And that's, I think, one of the main purposes of holding those intergenerational technology workshops. It's a great way of problem solving together, creating cross-generational community. But also, when we speak of intergenerationality, we often think of old person who's maybe 65 or 70 and younger person. Right. But our intergenerational workshops are also 65 to 90. There's generations ahead of us always, too, that we have to really think about even that term, intergenerationality, and what we assume by it.
Thank you. So one of the questions your research asks is, what does it mean to age in a society where the pressure to become digital is imperative for participation in public life? And the sort of sub-question I came out with is, has digital media fragmented or divided our society further in terms of the haves and the have-nots?
They have really done their homework. I'm going to first begin with a metaphor. A table. A table does two things simultaneously. It brings us together, but it also divides us. I'd say the same thing about digital technologies. It does the same. It can fragment us and divide us, and we know there are digital divides, but at the same time, it avails, if the right conditions are met, for the opportunity for connection to be created. There's many different theories about what and how digital technologies operate that I think we have to be aware of. And we also that's one of the things we question, and I think the panel on creativity were dealing with the issue of time this morning. That was really important. We know that, for example, in network societies, there's a propensity to not only be able to reach across vast amounts of territory or spaces that we could never have reached before. And for example, I just sent my mom a text message before this, not realizing this was going to be a live broadcast. I don't know if I would have wore my overalls, maybe. Saying, Mom, you can watch. Fantastic. But at the same time, we know other things are happening, like filter bubbles, where if we're with new algorithms, for example, that make assumptions about who you are, we can be divided in ways according to our politics, according to the repeated patterns that we engage with as we use our web browsers, that can box us in and keep giving us the same kinds of information over and over again, so that we don't get out of our own little digital communities online, and that is a danger. So we can never answer these things, I think, in a yes or no fashion. And part of doing research is to frustrate everybody in the world and say, oh, it's a complex question. It's complex. There's no real answer. But really our job as researchers is to monitor things and find out, if you believe in social justice, where the potential for change lies in any kind of given, I don't know, situation. The first thing you also mentioned was the digital imperative, and this is something that worries me, but we're observing a lot and thinking about. People will say, oh, everybody's online now. Well, everybody isn't. So what we need to look at as researchers are why. Is it because someone hasn't had the opportunity to learn? Is it because the cost of cellular and digital services and Wi-Fi services are really expensive? Is it because then when you retire, if you're female, you may have less money after retirement because you've raised kids and gone on maternity leave and pensions are indexed to income, and you have to make choices, hard choices about where you put your money? Is it because services are put online and they haven't done a very good job, and so you're stuck in a kind of architecture of digital hell, trying to get a simple answer? So there's many complicated reasons, which means there's an infinite amount of questions, and our job is to work with individuals and organizations to find out what is going wrong, what might go right, and how we can also enable people to get what they need through an engagement with technology in a meaningful way, but also in a way that, takes into account some of its limitations and liabilities.
So I had the opportunity to watch your YouTube video entitled Digital Care Work, which I highly recommend to our audience for a more in-depth analysis of that topic. Could you explain the concept of digital care workers and warm experts and where they fit into the relationship between seniors and technology?
Thank you again for this really tough, I feel like I'm having an exam on myself. What did I say? I didn't even know I was on YouTube with digital care work. I don't think I'll watch it, but anyway. The idea of digital care work comes because I think there's this kind of idea that digital technologies take care of themselves. And if all of you who own something know, anything can go wrong at any time. So there's constant maintenance and upgrade, for example. Suddenly, like here, there's a glitch in the video we're trying to show. We've tested it 1,000 times. What went wrong? It takes knowledge, and it takes know-how, and it takes time, and time is a certain amount of labor and work. So there's that kind of idea that in everyday life, we're also having to do things like manage. How many of you have drawers of old cables you can't bear to throw out? Yeah, a lot of hands out there. You have an old scanner, you have something on a hard drive. What you don't realize as well is if you don't play that hard drive, there's this myth of digital technology that it also is forever. Well, if you don't use that hard drive, there's a deterioration in the technology that means after 5 years, it may not be there anymore for you, and you may not be able to access a file. So again, people will say, oh, that next generation, they're just gonna, and I've heard this, and I'm gonna say it, it bothers me, but I'm gonna say it anyway, they're gonna die off. And when they die off, everything's going to be fine because this next generation is going to know. Well, no, there's constant upgrade, there's constant change, which means that care for the technology is never gone. I like to say technology is like a garden. You have to prune it, you have to take care of it, you have to decide how much time you're going to spend on it, and you have to manage it. So there's that. On the other side of that is that we see that technology is often sort of positioned as a way of taking care of problems that we have in society. Not enough care workers in our system, or that there's a kind of way that robots are going to substitute for what? They can be helpful, people will tell you, but there's also who's going to maintain those robots. Trying to get our little robot, Sam, will testify to this, getting it to work with the Wi-Fi. There's an enormous amount of knowledge you have to get the thing to work. And then when it goes wrong, what happens? It sits in a corner and you've got $1,000 worth of stuff that suddenly is just a piece of plastic and junk that's come out of the ground and is a resource. So digital care work is really thinking of all those dimensions of how the word digital, how the word care, and how work and the work it takes to take care of these things and the work you have to do to use it is kind of constant. Warm experts is a term from a communications scholar named Maya Becker-Virginian. I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, Maya, but it's the idea that as well we learn technologies because there's people there to help. So the warm expert is the person we turn to. It can be a family member, it can be a friend who you don't feel stupid saying, I don't know what's going wrong, but I can't get this to, it worked yesterday. Can you help me? Suddenly my keyboard doesn't seem connected to whatever, what is it? So the warm expert is the person who is kind of there. Eric is a warm expert. He's someone who makes it possible for all of us to feel like we can learn how to do this. Now, warm experts sometimes are people who are unpaid, but sometimes, again, this is an expertise. And I think in the digital world, I ask myself, who gets paid in the technological world? The warm expert, the so-called soft skills, helping people, often on the lower rung of the pay scale than the people who make the thing, the gizmo, the people who patent the software, the people who code, etc. So there's, again, back to this idea of digital divisions of labor and care work and the digital world. There's different valuations of that kind of digital care work and digital work that I think we also try to study in our field of media studies. And again, working with older adults, and I would say I'm one of those people now. When I started this in 1996, I was a younger person thinking about this, and I've been changing as the digital world's changed as well. And it's hard to keep up. And it also is just, what I would say is that wherever you're situated, aging is a perspective that, not just a variable, that gives you insight on changes that have happened before and changes that you're experiencing now and things that are coming in the future. So for us at the ACT Lab and at Engage, that's one of the perspectives we bring to this, is trying to be understanding that when you introduce digital devices into a long-term care situation or into your private home, that at some point it's going to involve some work. And when people stop using it, and this is what we heard in my field, people used to say, oh, they're old people, they're not interested. Well, no, sometimes they make choices that they don't want to do that work. They have better things to do with their time, or they have other interest. But they were called the hesitant user in some models of media theory. What we discovered by talking to people is they weren't hesitant, they were actually kind of wise. And they just decided that yes or no, I want to do this or I don't want to do this. I need it for this purposes or I don't. But this is also why the digital imperative matters so much, because at some point you also feel like you don't have a choice. When things are only online, what choice do you have? You can't do that on a mobile phone. You also have to do it. Sometimes you can do it on a tablet, but sometimes you have to then keep that old computer at home that you then have to keep updating, or asking yourself, can I update this operating system? What's working, what's not? So that's a very long answer, but it's because we need to do more thinking about, I think, all of us, this idea of how the digital is actually not just this wonderful thing that you press a button and it all just magically happens. It takes knowledge, skill, expertise, it takes work, and it takes working together.
Thank you. On that whole issue, in our near future, could you see actually training digital care workers the way we train social workers so that they could actually play that kind of role, especially between individuals and government?
I think that you've just made a really good proposition. So what do you think?
Well, that's what I think. That I think that, this is an area that really needs to be worked on. And I mean, we're in a university. What a better place to work on it in terms of the future of digital care.
Yeah, I think again, what we see, and we've interviewed managers in long-term care units, and we've interviewed people at home, we've interviewed older adults, we've interviewed and evaluated programs that were brought into being during COVID. And we quickly realized that during COVID, for example, when we were working in collaboration with Help Age Canada, who were doing rollouts of iPads, that at that time, people who were working in long-term care facilities were finding ways of incorporating digital learning and digital devices. And there were all kinds of fantastic experiments going on, but a lot of places didn't even have Wi-Fi. So again, there's all kinds of things that need to be put into place for that to actually happen. Right. Infrastructures that need to be put into place that become part of that environment, but also happen well. And I'll never forget interviewing someone who was part of a residence committee and her telling me, listen, it's wonderful they have all of these new things for doing virtual visits with various practitioners, but they've got the bell on the wrong side of my husband's bed and he can't move that arm, and so he can't even ring somebody to get the help he needs. Or why can't, if you're in a long-term residency, can't I order out and get a pizza that I might want? So I think it's just how we can also use these technologies and understand its integration so it doesn't replace what people who are working in those environments are already doing, where they're already doing a lot, but understand what are the new occupations that we may need to have in place? What are the new actual skills that take skills? Like we mentioned Eric, but many of the students who work here, Constance as well, and even you. I mean, look at how you've learned to hold a mic. It takes time and practice.
That's true.
And so it takes a certain amount of expertise and training that I think we have to acknowledge. And I think for sure, if we think that the digital is part of the future of aging and can maybe make some aspects of long-term care good. We interviewed people who, 100-year-old Ukrainian man like myself, I'm not a Ukrainian man, I'm a Ukrainian woman, but he had been given an iPad to use, and he had family who were in the States who he'd never visited and was able to learn how to use it independently. And so he was able to have conversations that he couldn't have before. They were doing wonderful things like having local musicians do concerts that were streamed into television. So there's a lot of creative things that are being done and can be done, but we're not really thinking about what people want, how it can be integrated well, and also acknowledging that this is work that should be paid work.
Thank you. Given your recent research on aging and media that's centered on community-based media practices, how is the web shaping the public knowledge of age and aging in Canada at this moment?
Again, it's a dual-edged sword. When I turned 55 a few years ago, yesterday, I started to get ads that popped up that were telling me that I had, to think of my bunions, to deal with my saggy jowls, to deal with my belly fat. That was making me think about maybe I should start feeling ashamed of my body. So obviously this new web world, which is based on also algorithms that come out that carry stereotypes about age and aging that come from long ago, can create, I think, a certain amount of aging shame that's not good. On the other hand, in terms of community-based practices like the ones we see here, people are basically hacking age and hacking the technologies in really interesting ways that maybe the developers didn't think about. So you're the innovators here, and you're here to tell us what it is that we need to, not tell us, but show us through the things that you're creating, like this podcast, what can be done that we didn't think we could do. And what is it that is there for us to always be learned at any age, and that even though certain kinds of what we would call in the language of design, affordances of the device, which means that, can I hold this? Is this screen big enough for me? And I'll never forget working with Rekha at some point again, and working with Madhu, and she couldn't hold up the camera but wanted to learn it. And I think this was innovative. Them putting the books underneath so she could prop her elbows up and hold it steady and be able to manipulate the digital camera. Those are innovations that come with aging and because of aging. And that's where I think, again, working in a community manner, you learn from others, and it gives you that opportunity to learn from others. Like I like to say, I'm not a good mathematician, 1 + 1 = 3. That is, you put two people together and you get a third thing that doesn't add up, but it's more than you could have ever imagined because of that.
Thank you. Is there anything else, given that you've been involved in a 7-year project on aging and communications, technology, experiencing the digital world in later life, that you would like to highlight that we haven't highlighted yet today?
I don't think so.
Well, that is...
There's lots to say, but I mean, I think maybe people have suggestions of what we should be doing or questions, so I'll just wait.
That's great. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to interview you, and thank you for your creative, out-of-the-box thinking and your innovative participatory action methodology. It's, you know, the way that you've defined this space, the way that you're conducting the interview, really, it's really the next generation almost to me. And so I thank you for allowing us to be part of it. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be here. And I'm going to turn it over to Bronya.
I just want to say it's not me, it's a team. Like, I am really the least important person on the ACT project. It's like every student who comes through, it's every community organization who inspires me, us, not just me, us. It's Constance, who's there all the time. It's Tristana working for Engage. It's Anne and Eric and Tracy Swim, I see is here. It's all my colleagues. It's all of you. It's people who've come here. It's Rekha. It's every organization that actually, Sheila, all of you being here for space and having the willingness to kind of go, can't we do things differently? And so I think I think it requires a village to change the world. And so we're a village, and we have to, doing it together is also just way more fun.
Right. Well, you've certainly created the synergy at Concordia for it to happen. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bronya Zaks, and I have something to say that's a little out of the box. Me and Kim are hockey buddies. 20 years ago, picture this, we both played at the Montreal West pickup arena, at the arena in Montreal West, a Saturday morning pickup. And of course, we kept both our shirts on. It wasn't shirts off, shirts on. But sometimes we were on one team, sometimes we were opposing teams. We were really good. That's all I'll say, and I'll leave it like that.
Bonnie, it wasn't just the mornings. I was teaching on Mondays, and we had Sunday night hockey.
That's right.
And the only time they would let the ladies, seniors hockey was 25 plus. And honestly, I started at 40.
We were a little older than 25.
And there'd be these young people whipping around us, like, I'm like, argh. So anyway, and then trying to fall asleep after playing hockey for an hour.
We had hockey 10 to 11 at night
Yeah.
at the Concordia Arena on Sherbrooke. And we, play our hearts out, and then we'd come out because we were in a few leagues together as well. And it was great times. I mean, I came home and put out the garbage for the next day. Like, you were sort of like hyped up. It's, 11:30
I'm like,
night.
I got to go to bed and teach communication theory at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Fun times, fun times. So I also wanted to say that I really love the title B/old. It reminds me of a Lucan ad on the back of a bus that I saw many years ago. Lucan is the Children's Cancer Association affiliated with the St. Justin Hospital. And it showed, a big ad of a little boy, obviously very sick with cancer, bald, slim, looking right at you as you're sitting in your car right behind that bus. And the caption on top says, "What do I want to be when I grow up?" And the answer is old. So we need to celebrate that we have become old, because the alternative is not so good. So it's a privilege to be old, and we really have to celebrate it. Kim, I'd like to ask you about the risks versus the opportunities of aging in our digital world. For example, the concept of digital harm, like when an algorithm changes your credit rating from data found on the internet site, or faulty face recognition, cyberbullying, invasion of privacy, identity theft, things of that nature. And on the other hand, technology is a terrific memory aid. I personally spent the winter playing bridge online. And when your cards are sorted and the points are counted for you, you do end up playing, but there's a lot of help that comes out through technology that when I started playing again in person, it was a challenge to remember, like, what's the score? What's the bid? What am I doing? Like, I had to think, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe this. And this was just a matter of 6 months because I was playing so intensely online. So anyways, it's just a tiny example, I know, but I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on the risks versus the opportunity, particularly for older adults?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually engaged in the middle of a study precisely on these issues, and I'd have to give a shout out to my colleague at Western, Joanna Redden, who's doing actually, and actually Francis can speak to this, sorry Francis, you're going to get called on. We've been kind of monitoring the situation in terms of data harms, and we call them data harms in the Canadian context. So Joanna started a number of years ago at the University of Cardiff working with people, a data justice group, kind of cataloging examples and instances of different kinds of data harms that were being reported, but also what you see when you study these kinds of things as they're being reported is also what is not being talked about. So she started a data harms registry that we're kind of now she's back in Canada, kind of contributing to and thinking about it from the lens and the perspective of age and aging. So one of the projects that Francis has been involved in is, in the first instance, looking in both the English and French language presses to see what is being reported by reporters and being put in the public eye or not. And again, there's wonderful projects like the Scam Booth project that Eric launched with, I think, Reka a couple of years ago, inviting older people, anybody really, to tell the story of how they averted being scammed or a scam that was done to them. So these are kind of instances of there's overt harms that we know about, and also ones that are a little more tricky to follow. So for example, and again, I'm not an expert in this, other people are who do more kind of precise work on algorithms, but part of the problem with doing that precise work on data harms is that often they're proprietary softwares. They're called, what scholars will call, they're black boxed. They don't let you see what the criteria are always. We know in the banking industry that age is a criteria, and that sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you may have. If you're an entrepreneur and you're still 70 and you may be female and you need to switch banks because your bank you think you might get a better deal at another bank, it may be difficult for you to do that switch because you might not be able to get the same line of credit you need to operate your business by doing the switch by nothing but your age, also often combined with your gender. And it's treated as a variable. It's treated as a fixed variable that is put into an algorithm. And this is a true story from somebody whose name I will not mention, of course. But anyway, so we're trying to, Virginia Eubanks, who's a scholar, a sociologist, has done a number of fantastic books documenting in detail more in-depth instances of data harms, but we also realized that a lot of those questions weren't being asked from the perspective of age, and so that's what we bring always to the equation. What is that connection? So Francis can maybe speak to some of this work and in terms of the data harms inventory that we're kind of do in terms of media reporting in Canada, but one of the things we find, I think Francis, tell me if I'm getting this right or not, is that often it's kind of tales of either individual remarkable people who are able to stop somebody from doing something, but a lot of it is the responsibility is always thrown back on the individual to have known better. So it's never a question of what regulations might be needed to punish people or to find out who is perpetuating the harm or what can be done so that we don't always have to be like, on guard and vigilant all the time. The onus is always put back onto the individual. Anything else, Francis? I would add that. Here, let's see, I need more than one brain. I have lots in the audience here. Go ahead.
Sure. One thing I would add is that when we started looking at the data harm, we wanted to categorize them in different categories, and we were trying to see examples of data harm that had been documented in the media. And what we found is that most of them are not documented. So our categories became potential harm versus experienced harm. And the large majority of harms we found are potential harm. So this is where we find the place where the onus is put on the individual, is that when you read the media, all you see is potential things that might happen to you, but you don't know how they will happen and what will happen and what are the consequences and what you can do to avoid these things. So, yeah, exactly. So a lot more potential harms than experienced harms in the media.
Thank you. That was just a little live moment. Opportunities. The opportunity is that we have to figure out also, and that's where I think the work of Eric and others is so important. We also don't want to stop older adults from using the internet. So what is it that we can actually do to sort of minimize risk? And that means, what are the kinds of digital literacies that need to be put into place? But it's a very complicated world. Who knew what a cookie was other than something you chewed a few years ago? And, so kind of, again, back to that digital work, part of it is sort of knowing what kind of protections to put into place and knowing what is a scam and what is real, without kind of telling yourself, listen, that means I'd never want to get onto the internet. At some point, we don't have a choice, and there are opportunities. But yeah, this is a really new terrain that we're also doing one of the first surveys on also how older adults understand and perceive privacy, and what you want in terms of information that's private and what information public. Do you feel you're being watched or not? And as well as I know, as you get older at some point, people want to take care of you. That can also be a real pain in the neck and in other places, because it can make you feel like, listen, it can make you feel infantilized. You can feel like you're being monitored. So who should be monitored? How much tracking of yourself, of your devices do you want? But these are whole new questions that we never had to deal with even 5 or 6 years ago. So these transformations are happening very rapidly, and all of us, young, old, whoever we are, we're being asked to kind of keep up. And so again, thinking about data harms is trying to create some public awareness of this, watching how the media is reporting it or not, what they're reporting, who the onus and the blame is being put on, trying to create a registry of actual and possible, and also doing comparative work across countries so that we can also put Canada into a context with other nations to see where we land and lie.
Also, I find that in the greater world outside for insurance companies or your communication company like TELUS or whatever, when you call up, there's such a push to go online. You can wait 45 minutes and somebody will call you back, or you could go online, make a password, create a file, and whatever. And so many times I find myself saying, I want to talk to a live agent. And I keep repeating that as I get option A, option B, option C. And I don't know, is this ever going to change, or it's just going to get worse and even more companies, and never mind the government?
I mean, they keep saying that the virtual chat assistant is going to get better, but I'm not convinced of that. And it's just, I do the same thing. I'm very cranky with the virtual assistant. I want to talk to a person. I want to talk to a person. Can I press 9 now? It used to be, what was that called, where we had to do the phone message thing, and you had to remember press 1, 2, 3, voicemail. Now it's like it's a virtual assistant. Then I'm not phrasing the question in the right way. Is it me? No, this AI is actually artificially stupid, not artificially intelligent.
Because they don't actually give you that option to talk to a live person. They just go, press 1 if you want to make a complaint online. Press 2 if you want to hear where we're located. Press 3, and it just goes on in a loop. And you can press a few numbers, and unless you keep repeating, I want to talk to a live agent, all of a sudden it just stops. Yeah. And somebody comes on, probably from,
But again, it just, in terms of people's time, it's as if we as consumers or as human beings have all this time to be caught in these digital loops. Or it's like a digital deflection strategy, it's kind of constantly trying to make it more and more difficult to complain, to get service. And it doesn't provide the same service as a nice live human being who has an intelligence. These are the times.
Well, Kim, this is great. Thank you so much for all your answers to my questions. I'm going to pass it back to Kathy, who's going to do our wrap-up.
Okay, we are about at the 50-minute mark in this great conversation. Kim, we've been asking you questions. Is there anything you want to share with us, or have we covered pretty much everything?
I think you've covered a lot.
Okay.
Is there anything else that comes to mind, or a story you want to tell about your experience? What's changed for you doing the podcast over time? What have you learned from doing this?
What's changed for me is that, interestingly enough, when I was 20, I was involved in a group project where we were a group of women who produced a cable TV show, and I was a camera operator. This was in Vancouver. There was some sort of community grant, and it was a big thing because, of course, women have been on television since forever, but very few were on the production end doing the camera, the editing, the directing, and we were just a whole group. It was called Women in Focus. I believe that some of the segments are even used in the university here in the women's studies courses. And as I'm sitting here on this side of the table, and as there was a young woman who came up and gave us our mics and explained, how to hold them, how to use them, whatever, I sort of thought, it's just so normal. Whereas 50 years ago, it wasn't normal. It was like, what? You're a camera operator in a TV station? It was not normal. So for me, the fact that we are sitting here on this end of the table and we are interviewing somebody is normal. It's the new normal. And I'm so happy that it is. So that's what's changed for me.
I think the main thing that's changed for me is that all kinds of people think I'm cool because I am a podcaster now. It's amazing because even Bronya was telling her son that we're doing a podcast, and he says, well, you can listen to it later, Mom. And she said, no, I can't listen to it later. I'm participating in it. I'm going to be doing the interviews. And he says, he couldn't believe it, could he? So I think that's it. I think it feels really good to be able to take the power and to be in this position where you can interview people and be in this role at this moment in time.
Yeah, it is fun thing to do, and for me it's great that we're no longer just relying on a very few people who are paid to be newscasters or disseminators. We're taking a role, and I think it's great. I think it's great. Does anyone in the audience have a question for Kim or a comment?
If anyone also online has any questions, you can pop those into the chat. We'll help there. And I'm just going to come up and steal one of your microphones so that we can pass it around. Just raise your hand and I'll bring it over.
First question.
It's not a question. I happen to be an old friend of Bronya Zach's. I just want to say for all of you, and also the speaker was really interesting. And I love it that it's forever, young. And I feel young as you're talking, and the energy. And I love now, there was another podcast from Jane Fonda. She said, we have to change the way we look at aging, because when we're talking about aging, we're talking about going, this is it. Like we're retired. I'm retired 3 years ago and going, what are you going to be doing? You're retiring. And because everything's going downhill. I know with our bodies too, but then I love what Jane Fonda said, no, this is the stairway to heaven, honey. It's all the way up. It's the way you're looking at it that changes. So thank you for changing your perspective, and please keep on doing it. It was a pleasure to be here.
And yeah, here we go.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for Studio XX. I wanted to ask, what would your vision be for a digital utopia?
I don't believe in utopias. I'm going to be Kim Sawchuk theory person. I'm going to say, following Michel Foucault, I would say heterotopias. Utopias are ideas and a vision that is unitary and makes us think that there's a single world that we all want to live in. But who decides what the parameters of that world are? The idea of a heterotopia, the word hetero in this instance, means like heterogeneous. It means multiple and varied, and strange and wonderful and wild. So my idea would be of a digital heterotopia that is not just digital, because I think that I don't want to live in a purely digital world. I want to live in a world that actually involves gardens and plants, like I do, and water and soil and earth and fire, and that I have the opportunity to figure out what it is I want in terms of maintaining connection with others that the digital can help me to do, and can be a source of creativity and information. But it doesn't mean I only don't want one source of information. I want to learn from touching soil with my fingers, or walking through a forest as much as, and then when I go back to working online, it makes me understand what this does that's different than what it does when I'm holding the hand of my mom, or walking a dog, or having a swim in the ocean, or the lake, or a swamp, or a stream. So I want to live in a world that's a heterotopia, not a digital utopia. That sounds like hell to me.
I wanted to comment about this idea of learning new technology, and something that when we were trying to teach my 90-year-old mother how to do Zoom, and she was talking about, I can't get technology, I can't get this, and we flipped it and said, well, it's just a different form of technology. And then we showed her the YouTube video, which you should all watch, of the 17-year-olds trying to use a rotary telephone. And if you have not seen this, there's a whole series, and it's hilarious because they don't know how the rotary phone works. And it just shows that, they talk about digital natives and all this. It's just the technology. It's just a different technology. And we think they're so much smarter, but watch them try to use the rotary phone and you realize it's just the technology that you grow up with. And when we showed that to my mother, she was like, well, I know how the rotary phone works. And I was like, yeah, well, then you can learn this new technology. And she learned how to Zoom. So it's just a question of, I think, thinking about it in a different way.
I think that's a really important point. And again, when you study the history of technology and you think about it on a timeline, like I remember you asked me about a eureka moment. It's also the embarrassing moments you make as a researcher where we're interviewing something and they basically give you a little slap on the hand. I asked somebody who was in their 80s, so, you're still driving? And I used the word still. Oh, you're still using a cell phone? As if, that's weird. And I was reminded that, no, listen, when we were interviewing people, started doing interviews on when we went from landlines to mobile phones, that's how I got started. And nobody was at that point talking to older adults about this transformation. I thought, seems to me an interesting question, because why not talk to older adults who are experiencing this transformation? And they told me, well, we're really happy to talk to you because no one ever asks us about what we're experiencing with this transformation. Everybody only wants to know how bad we feel, how sore our joints are, and are telling us what to eat all the time that's good for us, and not to smoke or drink or have fun, really, no. And so we learned so much from doing those interviews. And one of the things was that we learned to think historically, that some of the people that we were talking to had been working, had the first, mobile phones in their cars, giant, and people would do things like here's my brick, and they bring out this giant, the mobile cell phone. And it was just so wonderful to be reminded that who we saw as older were actually lived through a whole series of technological changes, from the radio to the television to the introduction of the internet in the 60s, and some of them had invented it, and they were now in their 90s, to, from telephone phones to cell phones, etc., add on. And so they'd had a whole history also of people telling them, if you just buy this phone or you buy this technology, it's going to make you live longer, it's going to make you smarter, it's going to make you rich. And so older people's skepticism around technology was also because they'd already seen it all, and they'd heard those promises and were going, yeah, sure. Why should I? You have to really convince me I need this. So again, back to what does age teach you? It teaches you a certain kind of skepticism when someone tells you this is going to be good for you. And you hear that promise over and over again. And to have that, as you mentioned, Sheila, in a sense, a historical perspective can actually be enabling. Because you realize, yeah, I've lived through all of these changes already. And this is another one.
Any other questions?
Okay. I think we'll wrap this up because it's almost the hour is gone. So, Kim, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and the results of your research. And thank you especially for your advocacy on behalf of seniors. It's really, you're making a difference. And I have a feeling you're just getting warmed up. So thank you so much for...
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming in today for this conversation. It's a live podcast episode. It's been fantastic. Those of you who come in the space, thanks for coming in, and those of you on Zoom. We'll be closing up that Zoom now, but actually, we're going to leave the Zoom open, honestly. We're going to close the live stream. We're going to do a quick transition. We have another live podcast conversation happening very soon, so, get some refreshments, etc.